Welcome to Hope in the Halls, Christian Voices from Washington, D.C., sponsored by Hope to the Hill, also sponsored by Can We Pray, with your hosts Nathan and Amber Kistler. Learn more about Hope to the Hill at www.hopetothehill.com.
So we are back again. I don't know what episode this is.
I don't either. I think we've stopped counting at this point.
I think we have.
We are in a different state again, but we are home. So we're in Georgia.
We're in Georgia.
Carrollton, Georgia.
On our new setup here that probably sounds a lot better than what we've had sitting
I'm sure.
in a hotel room with a single mic or whatever that may be. It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
So we have these really cool, I don't know what you call them, like a boom arm.
Yeah, sort
of. Yours has not come in yet, so you were a little upset.
Yeah, yours is a lot nicer than mine.
Yeah, mine has an LED light that you can change the color. It's a lot
great.
of fun.
Good for you.
Yeah, yours will be here tomorrow. But you did get a new microphone. So,
I did.
Yeah.
I have my own.
It's very nice. So this week, we wanted to change gears a little bit because we're going to be having some guests on in the coming weeks that will share stories about DC and all of that. And we wanted to tell you guys a little bit of our story over the last few years, just talking about how when things are difficult in life and, how God has gotten us through in the difficult times. And so I wanted to start back when we first got married. Our plan was to maybe wait a year to try to get pregnant.
Right.
Once that year came and went, I'll kind of let you share from there.
Make matters more understandable, we got married when we were 30.
Yeah.
And so I guess nowadays that would seem late in life, especially probably back in the early 1900s. That's really late.
We were almost dead.
Yeah, I know. So we got married when we were 30. And I think at that moment in life, we kind of felt like people were a few steps ahead of us because we did wait until we were 30 to get married. And I'm glad that we did that because I've had a lot of people ask me, would you advise that kind of advice to another young couple? And I would say, absolutely. By the time you and I got married, we both knew who we were. We knew what God had called each of us to do. And we went through premarital counseling, which was awesome. Shout out to Chris and Diane Tuttle. They're absolutely
totally
the best marital counselors you'll ever find. And they really helped us. They really helped us to get prepared for marriage and what that life is going to look like because you understand now, like when you join two people together in one house, we both lived very differently. And when I say differently, I mean, I'm a clean freak and you're a Tasmanian devil in that house.
Well, come on. That's not exactly fair.
It is fair. I can always tell where Nathan has been in the house because he leaves a trail of cups with Mountain Dew, or most of the time it's sweet tea from Chick-fil-A. And sweet tea at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, you can't hear that. I have it in my headphones.
I don't know what you're hearing, so it doesn't affect me.
I have a little...
Again, you have headphones. Listen, I don't have headphones.
I have a little button over here that bleeps out like if somebody was cussing.
Oh, my goodness, Nick.
I'm kidding. But no, I am a Tasmanian devil. It's true.
Yeah, you really are. Which, you know what? I think I've come to just not care about that anymore. I've just learned to... I love you for who you are.
Thank you,
and I know that I have tried to change that about you. And so, but you have been working on it too. You've tried to help around the house, keep it clean, all that kind of stuff.
Well, sometimes you learn too, when you marry somebody, that your version of clean is not their version of clean.
You don't have a version of clean, though. There is no clean in your body. That's the funny part.
That's not true.
I do happen to think, though, that it is we talk about marriages and having love languages. I do believe that acts of service is one of my love languages. So, for example, for those of you who don't know, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages, and it's amazing. Every person, getting married, thinking about marriage, maybe you're single, everybody should read this book. It really is for everyone. And it helps you, if you have a marital partner, it helps you understand what their love language might be, but it also really helps you understand what your love language is. And so I found out that my love language was definitely acts of service, which meant that if I wanted the laundry done, it would speak my love language if you went ahead and just did the laundry, or if you picked up after something. If you knew that this was something that I really love and I struggle if it's not done, and then you're really good at helping and getting those things done because you know that that really speaks my love language personally. And they also talk about in the book how you can have a love tank. And then if you're always constantly giving, well, just like if you're holding a pitcher of water and you're feeding but giving drinks to everyone who's thirsty and dying of thirst, your pitcher or your tank, as the love language book calls it, gets empty. And it is up to your partner to help fill that back up for the needs that you have in a marriage. And so all that to say, we got married at 30. I'm thankful that we did because we really knew who we were. We weren't kids, I would say.
No.
We had matured because life had brought some hard stuff in both of our lives. And so when it came time to get married, there was no guessing. There was no, is this the right decision? Is this the person for my life? We knew immediately that we were each other's one and only. And we got married in April of 2019. Now, little did we know, a year after that, we would be coming into a pandemic. And the pandemic started. Yeah, it wasn't even a year. I remember people talking about this strain of the flu, before it was called COVID.
Right.
And I remember people getting sick. Even you got sick in January of 2020. But this was before it had supposedly reached us over here in the U.S., but you had all the symptoms, and we had never seen you get that sick before. None of us had ever seen you.
I don't think you believed me at first. But.
Well, men are babies when they get sick, so it's kind of hard to tell what's reality and what's just being a little bit dramatized. But no, I believe it. And you were really sick. You were very sick in January, and then thank the Lord you got over it. And then we were on a cruise. We were actually singing on a cruise in March when we got the word that it had made its way to the U.S. and it was starting to spread. I think it started in like Seattle or California, one of those Western states.
Right.
And then it just took over the U.S. after that. Most people were telling us your first year of marriage is going to be the hardest. It's going to really test you.
Yeah.
But COVID was sort of a blessing for us. The pandemic coming was a blessing for our first year of marriage because we got to stay home and spend every day together.
Yeah, we thought, at least we've been under the impression that, and even our counselors had said at that point, y'all are the most unique couple we've ever, because you travel one way, you travel the other. And we'd even had people tell us that there's no way that that's going to work. And so God gave us, I think, a beautiful gift to have the opportunity to just have more time together. And we got to spend a lot of time with your dad.
Yes.
Which we had no clue at that point that your dad was he was already sick. We did not know.
Yeah, he had been sick for quite some time, years upon years. He underwent quadruple bypass surgery, and then he had beat cancer 3 times.
But he was very stubborn. He was very
stubborn. He never would tell me when he was sick. He would call my mom and tell her, and then she would have to tell me. And I think it was because he never wanted to feel like he was an inconvenience in any way in my life. And I always made sure to tell him, you are never an inconvenience in my life.
Yeah.
But that's just how he was. And that was never going to change. He was that stubborn. And then because of his illnesses, and then he got COVID in November.
Yeah.
And once COVID hit his body, they took him to the hospital. He spent 5 weeks in the ICU there. And he kind of went back and forth from ICU to regular room to ICU. Right. It was a roller coaster. It was a roller coaster ride. And that was during the time where they were not letting people into the hospitals.
Yeah.
So that was really frustrating because you could tell every time I talked on the phone with Dad that his voice would get weaker and weaker. And I don't know, you could tell he was kind of fading. And every day that I would talk to the nurses, they'd say his signs look amazing. He's improving. And it just did not sound like an improvement to me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to trust the doctors because I thought maybe I'm just a little overly cautious because it's my father. But yeah, it was a hard journey. And then come December, this was like 5 weeks after being at the hospital, December 2nd of 2020, was when he went to heaven. And when I asked the doctors, of course, I was upset because we could not be there. We tried so many times to get into that hospital and they would not let us in there with him. I can't imagine what 5 weeks of being in the ICU hospital alone could feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, that had to be torture. It has to be depressing. It has to make you not want to fight.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because you're in there by yourself. You don't have someone in that room who's motivating you, get out of bed. here, do this, make your brain work.
Or even fighting for you.
I know. And I feel like nowadays I love our doctors and nurses and anyone who has one. It's hard to trust some of them, though, especially during COVID when nobody really knew what they were doing at that time. COVID was so new. And even with my dad, they were trying still like the ventilators. Everybody, remember that? The ventilator thing?
Yeah.
Everybody, it seemed like everybody that went on a ventilator died during that time, almost.
Yeah.
There's very few people that went on one and then came back and they were completely fine.
Yeah.
But I remember I was at home, you were in DC, and I was at home by myself. And for whatever reason, and I really believe it was just God speaking to me, that I needed to call my dad that morning. And I don't ever, you know me, Nate, I don't get up past 9, 10 o'clock. I don't wake up before then.
You're a true artist.
Yes, but God woke me up out of a dead sleep and said, call your dad. And so I did. I called him. It was at 7 a.m. that morning, and his voice was so weak.
Yeah.
It was the worst that I had ever heard him sound. He didn't sound like my dad. And I just told him that I loved him. And they had been telling us even that morning, he's going to get out of this room today and go to rehab.
Well, that's why I went to DC that week.
Right, because we thought things were on the up and up. We didn't have a clue what was coming.
Yeah.
And rehab is just like a place where they go and they help them learn how to use their muscles, their legs and their arms again. Because you got to imagine, he's been in a bed for 5 weeks.
Yep.
5 weeks.
Very, very weak.
Very, very weak. And so he was just, his body was weak and fragile. And they were going to try to get him into rehab to kind of gain that strength back. We thought everything was great. I talked to him that morning and it didn't sound great. Even to hear his voice just sounded very tired.
Yeah.
He would say one word, then take a breath, one word, then take a breath. And I knew that a lot of people who had COVID, the breathing issues was a number one concern, which is why the ventilators became a thing.
Yeah.
And so it was about 3 hours later, I got a phone call from the hospital and they said that he was coding and they needed my permission to put a ventilator on him.
Yeah.
And so I made that decision, and they put him on a ventilator. And when they did that, it popped one of his lungs because it was so weak. His lungs were so weak.
Pneumo, I think is what they call it. Yeah.
And so, he passed that day. And we went up to the hospital that night and nobody was there. They kept the ICU floor open with just him in his bed. There was no other people in there. They had moved them all to another floor, but they wanted me to come in, along with my sister, to come in and say, our final goodbyes, just because we never got to see him in the hospital. And I asked the nurses what happened. I just didn't understand how we went from, he's going to go to rehab, everything's going to be great, to, we're going to have to put him on a ventilator and the chances are 80% he won't live.
Yeah.
And so those are drastic changes. And she said that basically the medicine that he was already on, that he had been taking for years from all his health issues, were in combat with the COVID medicine they were giving him.
Yeah.
And so basically it was going to be one or the other, right? That's just kind of what he was left with. So that was really tough. But that was December. So that was right before Christmas. Really, really hard. But
the silver lining, I think, in that, obviously, as we said before, we got to spend a whole ton of time with him that year.
We went to his house probably once a month, I think, during COVID.
Stay a few days and we never got to spend, we would see him maybe 3 times a year before that. And he would come to some events here and there, but for us to, you would obviously go see your dad, but when we got married and when we were engaged, for us to get to go spend 3 or 4 days with him was so rare.
Yeah, almost every month.
And it was, and then he came to DC with me.
That's what he always wanted to do. He
time.
Wanted to go to DC. That was one of his favorite places. Of course, Dad was a news junkie, a Fox News junkie.
Yes, he was.
And every time we got to his house, that was what was on TV.
Yeah.
And he loved Tucker Carlson. That was who he loved to watch. And then he loved Sean Hannity. Those were his 2 primetime television people on the news.
Yeah, so shout out, guys.
Yeah,
he loved you all.
He did. And then he'd call me and say, have you heard about this in DC? Have you and Nate heard about any of this? This is craziness. And I would say, Dad, you can't always believe everything the media says on TV. It doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
But that was almost his landline to DC was Fox News. And so, but
we had a great time.
We did. And it was really hard, to lose him. But I was very thankful. I talk about this a lot to some of my friends, that we never had to see my dad go through a nursing home stage.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost a slow death for some people, especially parents that others may have, that they have to watch that go down and you just watch them decline in front of your eyes. I can't imagine having to have watched that with my own father. So I'm just thankful that the Lord took him, and he went to heaven and got to see all his family, and he was healed immediately. And so all of that, to me, I had to look at it in a different way, or I probably would have never crawled out of the hole.
Yeah.
And so we went through Christmas. It was tough, the first Christmas without him. And then that became the year of first, as I called it, the year of first without Dad. And so he usually came to North Carolina for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Usually when we got married, that's where his Thanksgiving became, because we weren't coming there anymore. So we had him come there.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
My parents loved having him. It
was really neat that our families are so close, know?
Yeah.
And so then January hits. Now we're in 2021. And we started going to a doctor about infertility, because we had noticed that we weren't getting pregnant. We figured that there was a problem and didn't know where that might land.
Yeah.
And so we went to the local hospital here in Carrollton that has a OB and doctors that deal with that kind of thing. And the more we looked into it, we didn't know what they were going to tell us, but we did know that Georgia insurance doesn't cover anything to do with infertility. And so we met with a few doctors, and they said, well, let's try this. They gave us some medicine to take that helps women get pregnant a lot of times. We tried that. 3 rounds of that didn't work. And then they put us on a different medication, and it worked. We got pregnant. And that was in June.
Well, we found out in June because we had just been at the Gaither event.
Well, I told you on Father's Day.
Yeah.
I told you Happy Father's Day. That's kind of how you found out. So it was definitely in June.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I mean, I just remember we were so excited. We didn't know if we could get pregnant. And then because of this wonderful medicine, we did get pregnant. And then came July, which was really tough, because I know that there's a lot of women who talk about this where they say, we know when something's wrong with our bodies. And it's hard, I think, sometimes for a doctor to understand that, because there's just this intuition that I believe God gives women. And I don't think it's just with their bodies. I think it's with their children as well. They always know when something is wrong with their children, right? I mean, I've heard my mom say, I don't know what's wrong, but I know something's wrong because I know you. and I feel like that's how it is even with our bodies. I don't know what's wrong, but I know something's not right, because this is not how I normally feel.
Yeah.
But when you're a first-time mom that's pregnant, and a lot of people just chalk it up to, it's just your first time. Of course, you've never felt this way.
Yeah.
You're freaking out. You don't really know what you're talking about. And so we went to Panama City in Florida for vacation, and a friend of ours has a doctor who is an OB in Panama City, and I had just felt like something was so wrong during that whole time. I didn't have a lot of the pregnancy symptoms that mostly all people get. I didn't have the nausea, the vomiting. And I know sometimes that doesn't always happen for women. Sometimes they just don't get sick.
And you were in a lot of pain.
But I was in a lot of pain. When we were in Florida, I had one night of excruciating pain.
Yeah, I remember.
And I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. And I'd never had that before. It was not something I was used to feeling ever. And so our friend referred us to the OB in Panama City. Actually, it was in Destin. And we drove there and we did our first ultrasound. And at that time, we were only 5 weeks pregnant, I think, at that time. And when they did the ultrasound, they couldn't see anything. They saw my womb, but they saw nothing in the womb. But when I took a pregnancy test, it was positive. So I think at that point, they were like, well, you're still early. And, there's a chance that we might not see anything this week. You might have to wait till you're 6 weeks. So I said, okay. I was still worried. I still felt like something was wrong. And then when we got home, we went to our first actual appointment with our local OB, and they did the ultrasound, and they had the same screening that we had in Destin. They couldn't find anything. And then they looked over to the left tube, and then they found that there were not just one, but 2 babies in that left tube. And so that was my first experience of hearing the word ectopic pregnancy. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, me neither.
What's weird, though, is that now that I've had one, I have heard that word so much from other women who have actually had ectopic pregnancies. I think they've called them tubal pregnancies as well.
Yeah.
But the word that was given to us was called ectopic. And And I know they were worried about molar pregnancy, all sorts of different miscarriages that can happen, but ours was confirmed to be ectopic. And so...
I'll never forget when we were sitting in the room that day, and that specific OB there, because there's 3 or 4 on rotation at the
there's
hospital.
3.
And the one that we've gotten to know since then, she's amazing. But that particular OB came in, and it was so nonchalant. It felt like...
Yeah, this was the other one, not the one that we work with directly now.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's so many of these things. They're so used to... she was nice. She wasn't rude. It was just very
she was a little bit chipper for me at that point. I mean,
I've said, well, there's no babies in there, and you have an ectopic pregnancy, but we're gonna take care of it. You're good to go. You're gonna be all right.
Yeah, but then she gave us an option. She said you can either take a shot, which is called methotrexate.
Yeah.
And basically, what it is you pass babies naturally, or they would have to remove my tube, and that was the only 2 options that we had. And so I remember asking her, what do you suggest that I do? She said, well, I'm not allowed to give you a suggestion. I'm like, you're my doctor. Like, you have to give me a suggestion. Of course I'm going to come to you. I didn't go get the degree. You did. What should I do? And she said, well, if you were my daughter, I would tell you to take the shot. And then she said, you'll know if the shot doesn't work. And I said, what does that mean? How am I going to know if the shot doesn't work? And she said, well, you'll have, really bad cramping and something will be, feeling very, very wrong if the shot doesn't work. And so we went forward with that. We walked across the street, brokenhearted, and we were in a room with all of these cancer patients.
You were at the cancer center.
Yeah.
At the hospital.
Because methotrexate is a shot for cancer.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there just in depression, but I also looked around at what felt like 20 other people who were just sitting in these recliners with, IVs up their arms. They're fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
And most of them don't know how much longer they're going to live. And, and I was just like, man, it just felt so dark. Like I felt we were in a darkness. And so we went home, did the shot, came home on Monday, and I slowly, which you can remember this probably better than I can, but I slowly started declining that week. I remember I was telling you, like, I can't walk. I would try to keep up with you.
In the Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
And you were struggling. I think that was on Saturday at that point when you were struggling to walk. And I was like, well, that's weird.
Well, and during that week, nothing had happened.
We assumed it was just working.
Yeah, we didn't know, but nothing had happened where I had passed them naturally or anything like that. That never happened. And I started just, like you said, losing the ability to walk.
And to be fair, and to clarify as well, because, we're very much pro-life.
Yes.
If we had, the embryos at that point were dead. I mean, they weren't, there was nothing alive about them at that point.
No, there wasn't.
They had stopped growing within a week prior to that, I think. And so I always try to make that very clear to people, because I've had people go, well, some people likened that methotrexate shot to like an abortion or, something like that. And it was definitely not the case.
No, not at all.
And so I've always tried to make that very clear. But I remembered watching you go downhill slowly, and I didn't really know what to look for because they didn't give us a lot of information.
Yeah,
other
neither
than the
one of
fact
us
that
did.
You'll know.
That's what they kept saying. You'll know.
Yeah.
You'll know.
Until that Saturday, and you were struggling, and then you were on your heating pad at the house that night, and I remember that next morning, and I don't even know why. It was so strange. I woke up at like 6:30, maybe 6:15 in the morning.
I think I had gotten up at 5:15.
And you weren't in the bed, and the door was closed to the bathroom. And so I knocked on the door, and you kind of responded a little bit, and you were just saying, I'm in so much pain. And I remember you were sitting in the bathtub, and you were cringing. You were trying to keep it together. And I said, what's wrong? You said, I am in excruciating pain. And I remember saying, well, I think we need to go to the hospital. And you said, well, let me just see how I feel when I get up and get back in the bed.
Yeah, because I didn't know. In my head, I'm thinking, this is it. This is how it happens. I have a very high pain tolerance, and I probably get my stubbornness from my dad, but I hate going to the hospital.
Yeah.
I hate it. And so it's not that I'm fearful of it. I just don't like it. I don't know anybody that likes to go to the hospital.
Nope.
But I had told you, I had gotten in the bath because the heat felt good.
Yeah.
It kind of took the sting of the pain away for just a few short minutes.
Right.
But I remember as soon as I told you that, I said, let me get out and see how I feel. It didn't take 5 seconds from once that water left my body, it felt like all the pain just came rushing back at 3 times the amount of pain that I had before.
Well,
And
we quickly got you dressed and went straight to the hospital. Thankfully, the hospital was just down the street from our house,
hospital's
about a mile.
right down the street.
So we got in there, and I remember I got a wheelchair, put you in the wheelchair. I parked the car literally right in front of the drive-up thing there, left the car there, pushed you in, and I was begging somebody to come out and help. And at the, when in an emergency room, the people are very calm that work there. They don't. I mean,
they're trained
used
to be that way too. You have to be.
They can't freak out because you're freaking out already.
Yeah, but imagine if those are the people that are operating on you and they're freaking out. That's not the one I want.
Right. But they were super calm, and I said to my wife, I was trying to explain to them. It seemed like 30 minutes. It was probably 10 or 12 minutes that we were in there waiting, and they kept kind of saying, okay, hold on. Well, your head started falling back, and your speech was slurred, and
I remember my hands.
Yeah, we're seizing up.
And I kept asking you, open my hand, it hurts. And you tried with all your might to get my hand open to stretch it.
And then you said, I think I'm dying, is what you said to me. And I was like, honey, I'm sure you're fine. Well, I finally started, went up to the window. It was like, you have to send somebody right now. So they got you in this little office in the wheelchair. They took your blood pressure, and it was 69/56. And that was when I could see in their eyes at that moment, like, oh dear, the
temperature went up.
This is bad. So they quickly got you in a room and were trying to get you stabilized. And that was a rough. I mean, I just remember all that, and I know you remember a lot of that. But they started giving you medicine to try to calm you down because you were starting to hyperventilate. And ended up, they did the surgery that day. Mm-hmm. They found, your abdomen was full of blood. You'd been bleeding out for. And
we found out later I was going into cardiac arrest because of that. And
I didn't understand. I know neither of us did. Why that was happening at the time. On top of that, we had started a business during COVID. That whole week was overwhelming.
Yeah, it was a lot.
In so many ways, because some of the people that we'd helped start businesses with our business decided they were going to leave and part ways with us. And so just the timing was so overwhelming. And I didn't understand why God allowed what he did in that moment. Fast forward about, I think it was 2 weeks later, you were doing okay at that point. And it really took about 2 weeks for it to hit me. Everything that had happened.
I think 4 weeks was as long as it took my body to heal completely. Yeah. But it's like we always talk to people about this. It's more than just physical healing. It's a emotional healing, a mental healing. And, it's just, there's a lot that you have to wade through before you can really grieve. Yeah.
And I remember you went to meet with the doctor again. I think it was my first week back in DC because I was not with you. It was about a month later. You went back to meet with Dr. Turney.
Who is our doctor now.
She's not
our IVF doctor, but she did. Yeah.
She's the OBGYN.
She's the OBGYN.
And I thought that was such a beautiful, what she shared with you that day was such a beautiful thing, if you want to.
Yeah, so you have to go after surgery. I think they call it post-op. She checks your stitches. She checks to make sure that you're okay and that the surgery did what it was supposed to do and that I'm healing properly and all that. And when I walked into her office, she said, I have been waiting to tell you this. And she said, you couldn't handle it the day of surgery because I don't know if you could mentally understand it at that point because I was out of it even going home. I don't remember anything after that. But she said during the surgery, they were trying to, of course, they had to cut me open. And then they had to find where both babies were. And she said, now from the ultrasound scan, it showed that both babies were stuck in the left tube, but they only found one. And so she said, while I was in there, I told them we have to find the other one. We cannot, it'll kill her if we leave this embryo that's no longer alive inside of her. And so she said, we looked, and she said, I saw, where your tube had ruptured, but I couldn't figure out how.
And she said, by the way, it looked like a grenade had gone off in your abdomen there where the tube had ruptured. So there was a lot that they were having to clean up. And she even said to me, when you were in this last procedure, when she came out to talk to me just a few days ago, she said, I don't know if you remember this, she said, but there was so much blood in your wife's abdomen, we had a hard time seeing things. She said there was that much blood that had built up in her abdomen. And so they were having a pretty rough time trying to figure out where everything was.
Right. And that's from bleeding internally and the tube rupturing. It's basically poisoning everything in your body, which is why you go into a cardiac arrest, you seize up, you have anxiety attacks, all the things start happening.
That's right.
And so when I went in there, she was telling me, that a baby had come out of the tube. They found that one first, but they could not find the second one. And so she said, we looked around, and she mentioned about how much blood there was. They had to kind of get that out of me before they could really find anything. And she said, but what I didn't understand was how you made it as far as you did. Because when we got you into that hospital bed, we thought we were going to have to bring you back to life. She said, I thought you were coding. And I knew that I was. I knew that when we got to the emergency room, that's why I was telling you, I feel like I'm dying. I feel like, I'd never had that feeling before. Never. And so she said something had to have stopped that bleeding. There was no reason as to why, when that tube ruptured, that there was no more blood coming out of it. It was only what had already been there. And apparently it had released one of the babies with it. But she said something had to stop that tube. And she said the more that they examined the tube that had ruptured, they found the other baby had made a wall almost up against the blood from coming out anymore. Yeah, it plugged the hole. And so she said that was just a miracle. That was amazing. And so, of course, I talked to Gloria Gaither about this. This was after the post-op thing. And Gloria said, you always have to find the redemption instead of the reasons. And so a lot of times when we've gone through hard times, we're looking for the reasons because it makes us feel better. But honestly, God looks at it as redemption. He already knows the reasons. He already has the plan. But there's always a redemptive side of things. Even when you're going through something so dark, there's a redemptive side. And so what could have killed me, and should have killed me, Jesus said, nope, I'll save you and I'll use your baby to do so. And so that was pretty overwhelming to hear. That was just an amazing miracle that God had done. And then, so we started to heal from that. And even you, because you were so busy taking care of me, you didn't even really grieve until about a month later because you couldn't. I was bedridden, at least for 3 weeks. I couldn't move because of how hard the surgery was on my body. And you and Melody came over here, and Melody stayed the night at our house many times to give you a break to sleep. And then y'all would take turns. And so, it took you about a month to grieve. And I think a lot of people who are going through infertility or at least have had a miscarriage, a lot of the sympathy is given towards the woman because she was the one carrying the baby or babies, and she's the one who deals with the trauma of the miscarriage. But nobody ever thinks about talking to the fathers and telling them like, hey, he has to grieve too. It's part of life, and it doesn't happen without you. Yeah. Babies don't form without the fathers. And so part of that was really hard to watch you grieve later on, because I had felt like I had already gone through the grieving process, and I was trying to get out of the dark hole that miscarriage put me in, and I know put you in. And right about the time I'm trying to get better, it's starting to hit you pretty hard at that point.
Yeah.
And then I had to learn through our counselors that it was going to take time for you as well. And now I'm going to have to be just sensitive enough to understand that even though I want to get through this and I want to have the sunshine and rainbows again, you hadn't gotten there yet. And so it really is a team effort when it comes to grieving the loss of a child or going through a miscarriage or going through infertility. You have to do it as a team. You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And so that began our whole journey with IVF, really. We went back to Dr. Turney after 6 months. They wanted me to take 6 months to just heal my body, to try to not get pregnant, don't do anything for 6 months. So that's what we did. We went back to her office, and she said, you know what, I've had you on this medicine for a long time, and now with you losing a tube, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't see how it's going to work. But we're gonna ask that you go see this IVF specialist whose name was Dr. Best, and her name really is who she is. She truly is the best. And I remember looking at you going, okay, we're gonna do this. We're really gonna do this. We didn't know how much it was gonna cost. We didn't know what we were about to go through. We just knew that this was our only option. Yeah. According to doctors, this was our only option. Unless God did a miracle, this was the route we were going to have to take.
Yeah.
And so when we got to the IVF stage of things, we met with Dr. Best, and she smiles all the time. And I love that about her. Like she can tell you the truth, but she's going to tell it in a way where you're encouraged by it. And so when I got on the phone with her for the first time, we actually did a Zoom call, and I was watching her on the screen. You were there. And it was the most amazing interview I've had with a doctor yet, where she just sits there and says, we're going to do this. This is going to be wonderful. We're going to help you. We're here to help you. And it was like, for the first time, I had this doctor who didn't look at me as a number. You know, I wasn't just a patient. I was someone who she wanted to help, which, by the way, she's a Christian, which was amazing. We didn't go out looking for one. God just brought us Dr. Best. And so she said, you know, I'm going to pray for you. We're going to pray through this whole process, and it's going to be okay. I mean, that's kind of how she talks about everything. It's going to be okay. And every time she calls me now, she's like, everything looks great. We're on the right track. And it makes me happy and excited, because I'm like, okay, if she thinks this way, then I trust her. You know, she's one of the top IVF doctors in the country, which I just found out like a week ago. But she is. I think she's number 4. And so that's pretty incredible that God took us there. And so now we have been on an IVF journey. We found out that it was going to be close to $25,000, and we didn't have it.
No,
we didn't have it.
And God has been providing, and through a lot of our friends, we've had been saving, you know, some money as well. And
all of our savings that we did have, we put into that little account for IVF.
Yeah.
And then we raised money for the other part of it, and people were so generous and just loving, understanding, and very giving to help this. And the reason why we had to do it in the time frame that we did was because Dr. Best said, we need this done before you turn 35. Well, we were a year out from that point, and it takes a little while to go through IVF. So she did not want to waste any time. And I remember they called us every week when we were first starting this. Can you make your payment today? And I'm like, no, not yet. We're still working on it. But it's just funny because they live in a totally different tax bracket than us. They just think, oh, it was, $9,000 put down. That's nothing. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's a car.
Yeah. So, people who are in Christian ministry were like, yeah, well, just give us a little more time. Yeah. That'd be great.
But you know what? The Lord's timing was perfect. We started that in June, and we started the shots, which, Nathan, you have been an amazing caretaker. You gave me every single one of my shots. And let me tell you, if you ever need a shot given, Nathan's your guy. He's really good at it.
I wouldn't go that far. But,
well, we had to take, I think I ended up doing, 45 shots within a matter of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you did great. I will tell you, though, if you are going through IVF or you're thinking about going through IVF, the best way to take a shot is to take an ice cube and hold it over the area where you're going to put the needle, and it really does numb. I bought numbing cream from Amazon, did nothing. But a block of ice or a piece of ice, just hold over that spot where you're going to put the shot. It completely numbs it where I wouldn't feel the needle go in. But you do bruise. You do bruise a lot. And that's part of it, because those shots are going in the same spot. You have to alternate every day, but it doesn't matter. It's only giving it a day to heal.
Well, I think through all of that, one of the most beautiful things, and I don't remember who told me this, but it really brought some comfort to me when I was struggling with just working through all of the loss.
Yeah.
And that was this, even though it was your dad, but obviously, you loved your dad. I loved your dad. Your dad was awesome, a wonderful father-in-law. But somebody had said to me in a letter, I think it was a guy in our church, our sound guy in our church, actually, now that I think about it, sent us a letter and shared that he and his wife had been through many miscarriages. And he said the beauty of all of this is that Amber's dad is holding your babies in heaven.
We thought, because I remember we talked about it when he passed. We said, I hate that he'll never get to hold them, meet his grandkids until we all get to heaven. He'll never, be a part of their birthday parties. And we just kind of were living in that reality for the first time of, what was going to happen and what was not going to happen. And I just think it's God's beautiful way of making things happen that we didn't think were going to happen by him just sending them on up to my dad. And so that was it's a really cool thought when you think about it. Very comforting.
Yeah.
And Gloria Gaither was amazing during all of that time. She called you to check on me, and then she would call me. And she's a book of wisdom.
Yeah.
She's a book of wisdom. And I remember she told me, right now you need to grieve, but you're going to have to live life. You got to get out of that funk because there's so much more life to live and you're not even close to being done. And she'd always tell me, go outside, feel some sunshine. Don't stay in that house. Don't sit in the dark. Don't listen to sad movies, sad songs. Go out there and feel the sunshine on your face again.
Yeah.
And I did. I finally did that. I remember like on week maybe 3 of healing, I asked y'all to take me somewhere. I don't remember. Where did we go? We went somewhere and we just walked around.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
A lot of times it is Hobby Lobby because I think
it was IKEA maybe.
Was it IKEA?
You love IKEA too.
I don't remember. But we walked around just to get me out of the house and to get you out of the house. We had so many amazing friends, people from our church, people that are just friends that would bring us meals every day. And so, love towards us was really shown, and God showed us how much he loved us as well. And we made it through. It wasn't easy. IVF still isn't easy, but we're getting there. We are, I would say, 80% through of IVF.
Yeah. And I think, you may be asking, how does this tie into Washington? This is a podcast about Washington, D.C. And I got to say, some of the most beautiful moments, and I don't remember, we never told any of the members that we serve that we were going through IVF and all of that.
No, we never did.
And I mean, I was...
Well, and we do that because we walk into an office not wanting anything from them, right?
Right.
So we didn't want them to feel like, oh, we're doing this.
We're dumping our problems on you.
Yeah, we didn't want to do that.
So I don't remember ever telling anybody on the Hill. We told a few staffers that we were really close with, but I did find out that a few members...
Word had gotten around.
Well, yeah, they watch Facebook. That I don't know how they see our Facebooks, that they do.
They do.
And word had gotten around, and some of the messages from the members that we have spent years loving on and trying to encourage in their moments of loss and their moments of need, for them to turn around and bless us in that way was such a beautiful thing, because
one of them donated.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, a member from Texas towards our IVF, and a couple of members actually now. But I think it was just a beautiful way of God saying, I've got this. I always have. And it just reminded me that people don't not notice the things that you do and the work that we do as we're there for them. They take notice. It doesn't go unnoticed, and they've stepped up, and that shows the care that they have for the work that we've been doing for them and with them over the years. And so I have been so grateful for the opportunity that we've had to not only get to do the work that we do, but this also gave us a great opportunity to live out what we've preached with people.
Yeah, because when you go through trials, people really start paying attention to your testimony and how are they going to handle this? How are they going to be emotionally? Are they going to trust God during this, or are they not going to trust God? And I learned throughout this whole experience that there's a lot of people who have the same story we do. And it became, we were part of this club, this unfortunate club that is still has amazing people in it, that have all been through the same thing. And you know what? A lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people don't like talking about infertility, or they're scared to talk about it. A lot of people don't talk about IVF treatments. And so you know, it's just one of those things that when we became vocal about what we had been through and are currently going through.
Not for people to feel sorry.
No. It was really more so about encouraging these other people to know it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that you're going through this and you feel horrible and you feel like you just want to give up. That's okay, because we felt that way too.
Yeah.
And we knew we couldn't because there was way more important things still to be done.
Yeah.
And like Gloria said, if the Lord wanted to take me, he could have had me that day, but he didn't. For whatever reason, he didn't. And so that has to tell you, especially me, that there's more work to be done.
Yeah.
And then there's some of the members, the wives, they've lost babies.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
They've started conversations with me because they feel like they have a connection, to someone who understands, who not just sympathizes, but empathizes with them.
Yeah.
And
I think even down to just the last month, and I think we've said this before, maybe, but the first day of your shots, I gave you your first shots that morning and got on a plane to DC, and you let me go to DC to show Jim Caviezel, or to take him around and meet members. And when I
told
to leave,
you were not missing this.
No, I had to leave literally. I flew in that morning early, and then I flew back that afternoon, and was just there for the day. And whenever I told Jim, I said, I got to go now. I've got to go back home. And he's like, oh, you're going so soon? I said, yeah. I said, today's my wife's first day of IVF shots. I gave her first shots, and then I came here and I'm going home. And he looked at me, and I saw tears well up in his eyes. And it was this beautiful moment when you experience meeting somebody that has been in movies, that you expect them to maybe be a certain way. And I found that Jim Caviezel was definitely the humble man I hoped he would be. And for him to truly say, I'm so sorry, looking me in the eye, and with tears in his eyes, was such a special, special moment. And so God has been gracious to each of us. He has loved us so well, and our friends and our family have loved us so well. And we are very, very grateful that God is allowing us to continue doing the work that we're doing, that you're still here. I'm forever grateful for so many ways, but that you're here, that God has allowed you to be here, that we have the opportunity to have children, God willing, and that we get to keep doing the ministry we get to do together.
That's right. We're excited about the future for sure.
Yeah.
Because really it's looking pretty bright.
It is. Praise the Lord. But thanks for hanging with us. I know this is a little bit of a different episode, but we wanted to share a little bit about, our journey with you. If you want to read more about our journey, you can go to ourivfstory.com, ourivfstory.com, and read a little bit more there. There's some videos and things like that. But hopetothehill.com. You can check out what we do in DC.
And hit the subscribe button.
Yep. Follow us
subscribe
on whatever
to the podcast.
It is you're listening on. We would love to have you know whenever there's something new coming. And we have some exciting guests upcoming. So
we do.
We can't wait to share that with you.
We're also going to plan a podcast episode where it's just questions and answers.
Yeah.
We're going to answer all the questions that people have sent in, and that will be what that podcast is for. Yeah. And so I've gotten about 10 questions just that I did on my personal Instagram. But if you guys that are listening, if you have any questions, and I mean anything, DC, non-DC, spiritual, whatever you want to ask, infertility, we want to answer it.
You can even ask those questions on Spotify. There's a poll and all kinds of different stuff on there that you can ask as well if you want to do it there, or on Instagram.
Yeah, or they can message us.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Either way that you want to do it is fine, but
yeah,
we want to be able to answer those questions on a podcast episode. Because I think it's good. I think it's good for us to sit down and have conversations with people and say, we want to be open and transparent. What do you want to know?
Yeah, I agree completely. Thank you for spending your time with us, all 48 minutes and 35 seconds of it. We can't wait to share more with you. We're going to have a special guest next week. Can't wait to share that with you guys. It's going to be great. Thank you, honey.
Thank
you. It's a
you.
joy. Love you.